We're live. I assume we're live.
We're live.
Are we live? Everybody,
Everyone, quickly ask if we're live.
Do it live.
Are we live? Jason. We're live.
We're live.
Oh my God.
That's I frankly wasn't ready for any of this. So.
My name is Peter Doria. I will be moderating the panel. I used to run this shit back in the day, SGDA, until I retired. But now I'm back for one last job. I'm here to moderate this design panel, including Kyle Turchik, Tiffany Tarampe, and Cade Hendricks. Kyle, let's start you off. What do you do? Who are you? What do you do? And I found this little bit about you that I didn't know, and we've worked together a lot, Kyle, is why do you have a LinkedIn review from the UX UI director and actor on The Mandalorian? I don't know what that's about.
Oh, so first off, I'll explain that in a little bit. My name's Kyle Turchik. I'm a senior technical UI designer at High Moon Studios. I've worked on Call of Duty Modern Warfare, Warzone, and Black Ops Cold War. I was the president of the Cal Poly Pomona Game Dev Club back when SGDA was founded. I come from a technical background, but shifted more towards design because I wouldn't shut up and wouldn't stop giving the designers feedback about their designs. And I learned that I kind of have a knack for it, actually. So I'm a technical UI designer now. And I also really enjoy UI because I grew up playing strategy and 4X games like Civilization, which are basically all UI. So day to day, I work with both designers and engineers to develop UI systems for the game. And this may include in-game HUDs and front-end menus. And I gather requirements from the gameplay designers, then break down those requirements and kind of try to come up with a design that the user will understand. And then the benefit of having a technical background is I can implement my own features and understand what is possible and not possible within the limitations of the engine. So I don't have to have people tell me what is and isn't possible. I kind of work to break down those tasks into things that will meet the deadlines that we need. And so my old boss at Infinity Ward before I moved to High Moon was actually a part-time creature actor and made his own some of the costumes for The Mandalorian, and then also performed like 3 different roles in the first season of The Mandalorian. And so yeah, just an interesting thing.
I just wanted to know.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have asked you over drinks later if I didn't ask here.
Yeah.
So all right. That's Kyle Turchik, or Torchic. He likes being called Torchic also. By the way, Pokemon. Tiff, you work at Treyarch.
I do.
Tell me what that's about. Who are you? What do you do?
I'm a level designer over at Treyarch. I work specifically on the multiplayer team. So I work on designing maps for our core 6v6 experience. I've worked on the last couple DLCs for Black Ops 3 and worked through Black Ops 4, and then same as Kyle, worked on Black Ops Cold War. So my day-to-day tasks include working on 2D top-down paper designs, eventually taking that to 3D blockout, just play testing and iterating on that. And eventually, as the map goes deeper into its life cycle, I'll also be expected to like switch into more detail and technical roles as well. But yeah, so that's my main focus is getting those maps fun and balanced and out
you're a level
into the
designer.
public.
It's one of my favorite parts whenever I get to do level design.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not other people's favorite part, but sometimes it is. And you were also a musician back in the day. Interesting. Probably won't touch on that, but cool.
Yeah.
Cade, you are a senior designer at Obsidian Entertainment, and you've been in the industry for a little while now, so you're probably the most experienced person on this panel. So welcome. No. We're glad to have you. No pressure. No pressure. No pressure. Who are you and what do you do?
My name is Cade Hendricks. I'm a senior area designer over at Obsidian Entertainment right now. My background comes from mostly the indie sector. I did a bunch of work on the original Dungeon Defenders. I did work on Dungeon Defenders 2. I did a little bit of work on Defense Grid, which was a little game by Hidden Path Entertainment. And then I got picked up by a tiny little studio called Studio Wildcard, who went on to make Ark Survival Evolved. And I worked as a lead designer on Ark. I worked as a lead designer on Atlas. And then I decided that the indie space and the like 70-hour work weeks weren't for me anymore. So I smoke bombed, departed from Washington over to Richmond, Virginia, where I am now, and picked up a job with Obsidian. Yeah, I know. Good face.
Virginia?
Yep, Virginia.
Do they have like a spot right there, or you're working remotely?
I'm working remotely.
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
But yeah, that's my.
Right.
So I've been at it for a little over a decade now, mostly indie stuff, but on very, very big, wide scope, high budget stuff as well. And so my big shtick now is that I am essentially involved in the from beginning to end concept, paper design, 3D layouts, quest scoping, like a whole bunch of different elements of creating areas. At Obsidian, an area designer is generally expected to be given a specific area in whatever we're working on, and to essentially take ownership over that specific area, which means you're doing obviously all of the concepting, you're doing paper design, you're getting buy-in from leads, and the other designers will be working with you.
Area.
Yes, exactly. And you're responsible for it. So when it comes to making sure that it gets through all the steps of production to final, like, okay, this is at release quality, you are not only the person who's kind of making sure that along the way every step is being hit, but also you are kind of creatively the person who is responsible for it. So when it comes to like making sure implementation is done correctly in editor, sitting down and doing level scripting or blueprint, or using any of the conversation or quest editing systems, those are again things that ultimately fall to the person who is in charge of that area, but there are of course other designers and stuff who will be working on it as well. So yeah, it's a lot of responsibilities. It's a lot of like different elements that you have to have your hands in. You're working with basically everybody in the pipeline: QA, art, visual effects, sound, like everybody's going to be in there touching your stuff, and you have to know how to communicate with them, and you have to know how to kind of get buy-in from people and iterate with teams. And it's a lot of stuff to do, but it's also probably the most fun thing I think you can do in game development.
Sounds like a lot of foreshadowing for what we're going to talk about later on in this panel, so stick around. But for right now, before we split off into more of a conversation area, what I like to ask people is, what is your favorite game dev horror story that you can talk about?
Anybody mind if I lead? Because mine's horrible.
Go ahead.
So my biggest horror story that I can possibly imagine was My Fault, which automatically makes it terrifying. We were, I don't know, maybe we were 2 or 3 weeks into some really, really, really crazy crunch coming up to the release of Ark into early access. This was our big debut. Everything was going to be like, everything was set out, and I had gone way too long without sleep. Like, it just bad me, obviously. And like I said, I kind of got out of that sector to get away from crunch, but we'd been at it. And so it comes release day, and there was a bug that popped up that would have been a small problem, but not a real small problem, but not a real big, like it wasn't a huge deal. Nobody needed to touch it, but it showed up and I wanted to touch it. And obviously I'm not in my right mind at this point. There was a scaling value that kind of decided how many resources our rocks would give when you broke them. And that scaling value was kind of meant to be contained within some bounds. And if it went outside the bounds, it silently failed to allow you to harvest the rocks. And you need the rocks to do anything in the whole game. And so at release, we've got all these streamers, we've got all these awesome people lined up to play the game. We release the game, it goes out, can't mine rocks, broke it, put the wrong values in. Nobody could mine rocks at all. You can't progress in the game, 0 progress, you're stuck. It was a disaster. For hours. I've never felt more mortified in my entire life. And then we pushed out a patch in like took maybe 2 or 3 hours for us to get a patch, like to suss out the problem, get a patch deployed, get it approved, all that, and then everything was fine. But yeah, so I ruined our launch, and that was exciting.
Oh.
Just made
I'm-
my hands all sweaty.
Revert.
Revert.
Yep. Yeah, no, it was a nightmare, but we made it through.
Get reset hard. Right. We're gonna go over Tiffany, favorite game dev horror story that you can talk about.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, this one this is more something that I like to share in terms of like kind of figuring out your boundaries and your setting up your mental health in a way that you're advocating for yourself. So kind of the same deal. Like we were crunching, we're pushing through like the last bit of content. You know, we came up to DLC and you know, my team was talking to me asking if we could push rest time back so that I could help support with the final content that we're trying to push out, and I agreed and just like was freaking just pounding my head against this wall, just like couldn't solve the design issue. Was like working over Christmas and all that stuff, and yeah, it was just one of those where at one point, you know, I just like broke down. I like went on a walk, may have cried a little bit. But you know, that was like a huge lesson for me in terms of, you know, being aware of what my capacity is and being honest and like talking about when I'm tapped and just being real about it. And it's ultimately what is best for you and best for the company if you're honest about, you know, when you need a break. It's important that you talk about it as well. So yeah,
what it comes down to is I'm not in my right mind to do this thing.
Yes. Yeah.
I might break shit.
Yeah.
You don't know. Kyle,
Hey.
tell me something I haven't, actually I don't know that I've ever heard you tell a game dev horror story.
Yeah. Well, I could tell a story about how I broke the build, but Cade's story is worse, so I'll skip that one. So the moral from that is that, you know, I think everybody breaks like the game at some point. It's just
Sure.
inevitable. It will happen, and you know, like don't like just handle it. Don't worry about it because everybody does it. But mine, I think. I can tell a story. One time, a UI artist, reached out to me and asked me, just where can I find this menu so that I can do an art pass on it and a design pass. This was like 2 weeks before we went gold, which is when we print onto discs. So we were about to like ship the game, and they asked, so where can I find this menu? I need to do an art pass on it. I'm like, I don't think that this menu exists yet. So they said like, oh, well, production said that it does. I just need to reskin it. And I'm like, I don't think it exists. Let me go talk to production. So then I talked to production, and they said like, oh yeah, it's all done. I'm like, no, I really don't think that it is. and I'm like, and then they're like, oh, okay. Well, how long would it take to set it up on like the technical like UI side? And I'm like, well, I think that it would require it was like a rewards menu for like giving people rewards. And I'm like, I think that this would take some networking help to actually, you know, get the rewards working so that we can track the rewards and give them to people. And they're like, oh, well, that's all done. The online team already took care of that. And I'm like, did they? And I went over and I talked to the online team, and they're like, what? What is this feature? I've never heard of this before. And production. So it was like, this is like 2 weeks before we're supposed to ship the game, and production was like completely convinced that this was all done and ready to be arted up, and there was no problem. And this happens way more often than you would think in AAA game dev. It's rather horrifying. Yeah. So the moral of the story there, I guess, is just like don't trust production. Be proactive about your own tasks, and when you recognize that like work will need to be done or that it's undocumented, just call it out as early as possible. There's too much stuff realistically to be tracked sometimes, especially with like a big AAA game, and people will just like you'll be recognized as a hero if you point stuff out that needs to happen. Sometimes
hero
things
of your
slip through the
people.
cracks. It just happens.
Wow. Okay. I don't know why I felt the most stress on that one. I just maybe it's from running things. I don't know. Anyways, moving on. Now we're gonna. I opened this up. We're out of story time, so now we're gonna be talking about things more specifically. And if you feel like somebody says something and you want to jump on, feel free. Don't interrupt, of course, unless you feel very strongly, and then you guys can fight over it and rock paper scissors because I don't know how else to Zoom call. But the question is, being able to play or look at a game and immediately break down the player experience is an essential skill as a designer. How did you build this skill, and what was most effective in building this skill? And we'll start with Kyle because you finished.
Going back and forth.
Yeah, we're going back and forth here. You don't know.
Well, I don't think that anybody can actually look at a design and immediately break it down as much as we would like to be able to do that.
Sure.
But you can. With practice, you can, and doing a lot of analysis, you can like speed up the process in which you like understand stuff. But it's always going to take quite a bit of time and quite a bit of iteration, especially when you're developing new features that don't really have a precedent. I think that the best way to develop the skill is to play games, and not just play games yourself, but watch other people play games and play games with other people and see how they interact with games, because they will interact with games different than you will. Like, I'm a completionist, micromanager type of person, and I'm going to play games completely differently from just a casual person that doesn't really care about micromanaging, just wants to play the game and have fun.
Sometimes I feel like I learn more when I'm watching like my brother play a game as opposed to I play a game, because I can actually observe what's happening.
I actually
what's going on in this.
I actually enjoy watching streamers play the games that I've worked on more than playing the games myself. And I really enjoy the games myself, but I like watching how other people interact with it. But you can learn a lot about how to better your designs by watching other people. Because usually, I think first you're going to design what you would want in a system. Like if it's UI, you're going to design what you would want to see in menus. But then you'll see other people interact with them, and your design will start to fall apart a little bit. So I think the best way is to just expose yourself to as many different types of games and different types of play styles as possible, and and then put your own designs through the test. Like, pretend you put yourself in other people, should role play a little bit. So if I were this type of person, what would I do? And then you can start to find some flaws in your design and just try to improve it that way.
Oh, great. Anybody want to jump on that? Especially strongly?
Yeah, for sure. Like that, I feel like we're all probably in the same mindset of play games and try to think through them critically when you're playing through them. I think in terms of like level design specifically, I try to be mindful of like when I'm entering a space, how is the layout encouraging me to go and explore, or was it telling me to do?
Yeah, one of the first things when I look at something, the first thing I usually think about is readability, because I feel like that's the first step to even a player understanding what is going on. And if they can't read what the space is doing or where it's encouraging them to go or what concepts it's trying to teach them, then how are you going to know what their experience is?
Yeah, like even on top of just what the geo's telling you to do, also being mindful of what other departments and their work are doing to support as well, and create the full atmosphere. Like, you can have a shack in the middle of nowhere, and if it's pitch black inside, maybe you'll pass it. But if there's warm light coming out of it, there's audio of like glasses clinking, you're like, oh, okay, I'll go into it, right? And being mindful of how all these things come together in a level, that helps you as a designer also be more holistic and plan for the end product, instead of just kind of being hyper focused on what your geo's doing.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about specifically learning from or learning how to sit down and play games and to analyze and to really think about what the not just our experience but others' experience with games is, obviously everybody has hit on play games, but I would say that if you want to be a good, like if you really want to be good at whatever it is that you are working on in design, not only should you figure out what that is, because there are a ton of different kinds of designers. You've got audio designers, you've got level designers, you've got quest designers, you've got narrative designers, you've got systems designers. Like there's a ton of different types of design that can be done. And these are all largely specialized roles unless you're in a very small company. So not only figure out what it is that you're really interested in, but also make it your responsibility to yourself to make a schedule or make a habit out of sitting down and doing design analysis. When I was first getting into it, and even to this day, although I'm slightly more lax about it nowadays, I made it so that every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I would sit down and I would just play a new game for about an hour. And I would do whatever analysis I could of that game's mechanics, of its like gameplay elements, of all the things that I was interested in whatever field that I was interested in developing. So if I'm looking at card games, I'm gonna go play a bunch of card games. If I'm looking at adventure games, I'm gonna go play a bunch of adventure games. And just spending like that hour sitting down and thinking about why designers made the choices that they did in developing the systems or the art or whatever it is, that I think was probably the most transformative thing that I did outside of like talking to other professionals and getting into actual real conversations with people about how they're designing things. And books, please, please, please read books. Go read The Art of Game Design. Go read a book of lenses. There's a ton of good literature out there that doesn't necessarily try and tell you how to make things, but it explains why the things we make work and why it is that the people who play our games play them. Kyle was talking about how he's a certain type of game player. He likes micromanagement. He likes completionism. That is part of an element of game design analysis known as Bartle's taxonomy. And Bartle's taxonomy, while a little bit dated, goes over all of these different types of, they were originally for analyzing mud players, for people in multi-user dungeons.
The achievers, the killers.
Exactly. Yeah. Social.
Yeah, there. I forgot the other ones.
There's an expanded taxonomy somewhere else too that kind of deals with the 3D matrix of players in terms of intensity versus interest. I wish I had a link on hand so I could place it somewhere. But yeah, it's a really cool breakdown, and you should come to understand these types of game players more than just about anything, because when you're sitting down to make a game, you are catering to a specific demographic of players. You are not, if you're making Call of Duty, you're not making a narrative role-playing game. And I think that's obvious on the surface, but if you built up a bunch of skills around building narrative and like complex RPG systems, you don't necessarily want to apply those principles to whatever it is that you're making in Call of Duty or whatever it is.
So for instance, you worked on Arc previously.
Yes, correct. Yes.
And you would not go to Call of Duty with the same mindset of Arc.
Correct. Yes.
And you wouldn't
absolutely.
think of these are the same players.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to really like, I think that knowing players is essential, not just to game design, but also to having, I guess, as a player, more empathy for the games that you play by understanding what this, like who this game was made for, so that you don't walk into a design and go, hey, this doesn't make any sense. Why am I, doing collectathon in a card game when the game was made for people who love collectathons and card games, even though the two genres don't necessarily mesh terribly well. Maybe they do, but the point is that understanding what the game's intention was is also very informative to how you analyze its design.
RPG players like to read, and Call of Duty players do not. They just want
I
to
hate reading, but I love
Just want to
stories.
run around. Yeah.
They like to shoot and swear at each other.
Yeah.
Like that's Call of Duty.
I have this conflicting thing where I love art, I love story, but I hate reading in an RPG if you're making me stop to read every single thing. So like oftentimes, we can talk about the idea of like a game that's an RPG that is trying to cater to these different demographics because it just costs that much to make. For one thing, sometimes that's just the thing. It's like cost X to make. We need to cater to more audiences. Designer, figure it out.
Well, and you look at games like
And-
Borderlands, for instance, which is
Sure.
kind of an RPG. It's kind of a narrative
Mhm.
experience, but you're not sitting and reading for forever. You're running around and
Mhm.
shooting everything,
Mhm.
and they have the budget to voice act all of that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
I had a friend who refused to play Disco Elysium until they put voice acting in it because they weren't going to sit there and just read lines and lines and lines and lines of text, but they're really huge RPG fans. So as soon as voice acting goes in, they're like, oh, great, I can just listen to people read this stuff that I don't want to waste time reading. And then they had a really good time with it.
I would love to keep going on this tangent, but I have so many questions and so little time. So I want to get more something relevant to the student focus of like they want to get into the industry. So say there's an entry level design position, say like maybe even in your specific craft. There isn't probably an entry level area designer, but I'm sure you can imagine kind of an equivalent, Kate. But I know there's probably more entry level UI and there's definitely entry level as well. So what are the core skills you want to see in their portfolio to know they can do the job? Or there's things that you see it and you're like, they probably can't, they don't have this thing that I'll need to talk to them about for even them to get to the next skill, to get to the next level in order for me to be able to rely on them. So what are example things in a portfolio that you want to see?
Oh, please, someone else go ahead. I just rambled for quite a long time. I don't want to.
Tiffany,
resume
No,
that.
I'll go.
Go.
I mean, honestly, for me, for an entry level,
Mhm.
I mostly want to see their thought process.
Mhm.
So I think a strong level design portfolio shows, what was their evolution of the map? Did they do a 2D top down? Did they ref grab? How did all these things that they did for preparation in heading into 3D? How did those manifest in the geo itself? And even on top of that, like if they have screen grabs of all this stuff, like even just a little bit of text being like, hey, this was the goal for this area. I wanted players to feel sneaky, so I included this tiny little alleyway to flank around. That shows me that they have intentions with the choices that they're making, and they're being mindful of how that affects the player experience. Having seeing their thought process, that tells me where they are in their journey, and their like which concepts they have like a strong grasp of, and which ones that we would need to work with them more. But in terms of like specific skills, since I'm like focused on multiplayer Call of Duty, where you gotta like be able to understand the space in like a split second and react and adjust. The main skill that I want to see is how you frame everything. So what info are you giving the player in what you're framing, and how does that tell them to interact with the space? Because the frame that you show them, that's like your first impression. If you drop them into space and the things you want them to play with aren't framed correctly, they immediately don't know what to do. And so that's a big thing that I try to look for.
I'd imagine if
shots.
if a designer showed you their map and they dropped them in the middle of the map and there was paths going in every direction, you might have mixed feelings about why they did that.
Right. Yeah. And that's something that maybe I'd be more flexible with, because there are like subtleties that help with the design. Like, okay, maybe the main path's a bit wider, you have side ones being a little bit skinnier, but those are things that could be developed as you grow as a
Yeah.
designer as
I
well.
really like that you mentioned the development. I think what is important is people, when they think of like getting a job in the game industry, they almost feel like they need to know everything, and
Yeah.
that isn't true. You need to know certain things.
Yes. Yeah.
Because they're willing to work with you because they see you have the baseline skills to build the next level
Yes.
skills.
Yeah. That's a
I
huge thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, I can add one to that too. Like looking at an entry level portfolio, first off, just if you have anything to show off that you have done yourself, then that's impressive. Especially if you did it outside of school, and it's not a school project. That's impressive. I don't really care how pretty the game is, or even if it functionally works. I just want to see that you did something and that you tried. And I want to know what it is that you specifically contributed to the project, if it was a team effort. And like Tiffany said, a breakdown of why you did this thing, why you designed a certain thing this way. And if you could critique your own work also, like I think that's great. If you can say like, I would have liked to do this, but you know, it was a hackathon project or something. But I think that shows a lot, because all like what we want to see from a portfolio is your ability to learn, and also a desire to want to learn as well, and an ability to learn proactively on your own. I also think that one of the most important skills as a designer, probably the most important skill, I think, would be just communication. So being able to explain your design to somebody else and try to get them to see your point of view, and also to understand other people's points of views as well. So it's the ability to take criticism and feedback. If you're working on a team, I think a lot of people have, it's like we can't really help it. It's like human nature. We have these biases where we like, the first idea that we'll come up with is the idea that we will think is the
one that works,
the best, the one that works. And so to try and work with other people that all have their own individual biases is difficult, and communication skills help to overcome that. So an ability to communicate your thought process to somebody else so that they can see your perspective, and then also an ability to understand them, and a desire to want to understand where they're coming from, and overcome your own personal biases to take that feedback, I think is really important. If you can ask questions of other people, then to want to understand where they're coming from. Maybe they have a reason for why, like if you're a UI designer and working with gameplay, and they have this feature figured out, and they had a plan for the UI, even though they're not a UI designer, but they think that it has to work a specific way. And then they tell you the like what they're looking for in the UI. You come back and you change it up and you give them a design. They're not happy with it. You'll have to like try to ask them questions why they wanted it a certain way. Maybe there's some detail that they left out that you didn't have a thought about originally. You didn't know. But yeah, I think communication is really important. This is kind of hard to show on a portfolio, but it's definitely something that you can demonstrate in an interview process. One of my favorite interview questions that I was ever asked was kind of a bait and switch question, where they asked me, I thought that it was just a getting to know you question. It was, what is your favorite game and why? And I explained what my favorite game was, and why I think I chose Fallout at the time. I really liked Fallout. And then they said, okay, what do you not like about the game? And I luckily I played the game so much, I was able to just like rant about all things that I didn't like. But an ability to break down or to analyze things like that is also really
I love that, Kyle. I've had conversations with people where I'm like, I want to talk to them about like my feelings about games. And so much of my feelings about games are what I don't like about games.
Yeah.
Because you're a designer, you kind of have to analyze. You're going to find things you don't like. You're going to find those hard edges. when I meet somebody and they're like designery, and they don't want to talk about those hard edges, they're like, no, I don't like to talk bad about games. I'm like, man, how else are we supposed to get better? Like, what do you want from me? I don't understand.
Yeah, and I think that can help with your portfolio too. Like, if you don't want to, like, if you're a UI designer, try to look at games that you like to play, and look at the HUD or look at the menus and see how could I improve on the layout of this. There's so many UI mods. I think UI mods are the most popular for any game. There's always going to be like a UI mod within the first couple days, because and usually they're like really good. Most people will use them, yeah. So try to just come up with a design. How would you improve games that you like? And if imagine there's a feature you wanted to add to a game that doesn't exist, how would you fit that into the existing menus and stuff? I think that can help a lot for a UI portfolio.
There is an axiom I try to stick by whenever doing any kind of hiring, any kind of interviewing, and that's that there are skills which can be taught and there are skills which cannot be taught. I want to see the skills which cannot be taught when I'm interviewing somebody. That's things like creative thinking. That is things like critical thinking. That is things like the ability to do not only give and receive, but also know an empathetic way of giving and receiving feedback on things, so that you aren't like busting into somebody's design and going, oh, these UIs are shit, and a much better person could fix all these UIs. Every time I use them, I want to die every time. And they're bad. Like, that's obviously, that can be true of stuff, but it's not necessarily helpful, and it can like, it can put people off. And the truth is especially when you're working at bigger companies with a lot of people, one of the most important skills that you need to develop and that you have to use is the ability to not just, again, communication, extremely, extremely important, but interpersonal communication and being nice with and knowing how to communicate with your coworkers, especially as an area designer or somebody who's going to be interacting with a lot of these elements. It's going to be easier to get other people at the company to want to do things for you, make time for your things, agree with you on stuff, get buy-in, if you're at least cordial with them and know how to communicate those ideas in a positive and constructive manner. So those are a lot of the things that I try and suss out when I'm interviewing with somebody, or if I'm looking at a portfolio specifically. Again, I think it comes back to seeing process, seeing somebody's ability to make qualitative and quantitative statements about why they made their decisions. Because it's one thing to say, yeah, I had this specific rate of level scaling on my character's level up system because it's the one that Pokemon Red used, which is a perfectly feasible like level scaling curve. But being able to talk about like,
why does that work for this game?
Yeah, my progression is set up in such a way that, I decided that I wanted the players to, have a really, really quick ramp up so they could get access to these core skills. But then all the fluff stuff happens later on inside the game. And so like being able to qualitatively and quantitatively talk about the merits of and demerits of their own designs is something that is terribly, terribly important to me. I'm always, I don't care if you've used an editor before. Like, obviously it's good if you have, but I'm not going to knock you if you've never used Unreal or if you've never used Unity or if you don't know what Maya is, or in some cases those will throw red flags. Like if you're a mid-level designer and you don't know what Maya is, you need to go talk to somebody, because Maya is one of the premier 3D animation and model building programs. And at some point you probably should have encountered Maya if you're working in 3D games.
Probably.
But yeah, tools, things, process related stuff that can all be taught. And most companies are happy to teach you those skills, because the other skills that you can't teach, the passion, the drive, the empathy for other people, those kinds of things, not only can you not teach them, but they're very, very valuable. Because when you get somebody who doesn't have those, the damage that they can cause in terms of morale to your teams, in terms of actual time lost to bad decisions or people being upset or somebody skirting production and screwing something up because they just don't care, is tremendous compared to the amount of time loss that happens when you say, no, I'm not hiring you. I'm going to pick someone who's better suited.
I've got one more tip for it that I think is as applicable for entry-level developers. That is
Hot tip?
Yeah, yeah. The tip is something I heard recently, which I thought was good, which is be the idiot. It's okay to be the idiot, and it's okay to ask questions of other people. There are so many times where you'll be in a meeting and somebody's explaining something, and you will just not understand at all what they're talking about, and it's okay to interrupt and ask questions about it. Because most of the time, all the other people that are in the meeting, if you're not understanding it, they are not understanding it either. They just don't want to say anything. And so by you being the idiot, it's okay. You will ask the question that everybody else wants to hear, and that helps so much with communication. The willingness to ask questions.
Yeah, that's a huge thing too. Like as soon as you come into the industry, you know, it can feel very intimidating and intense because you're there, and you know the vibe is like, let's go, let's make some content, let's make the game. But honestly, like people want you to be coming up to them. People want you to ask questions. It's a lot more inviting than it can feel at sometimes. Like you see everyone running around super busy, but you know, if you're like, hey, you know, whenever you're free, I'd love to chat about this. Being respectful of people's time and wanting to communicate, you know, that's something that people want you to do more often. Just as video game nerds, like we're mostly introverted and it can be tough like reaching out, but I promise you everyone wants you to please reach out as long as you're, you know, being respectful of time and all that stuff.
Knowing when to ask is also important, but I think the most important thing that everybody's landed on is you not asking is going to waste more time than you not asking. And hiring somebody that doesn't have those core skills, your time arcade, is going to waste much more than time. It's going to waste
time, money, and it's going to waste the time of people who, and I say this with love and respect to anybody who isn't in a very senior position, but if you are wasting a lead's time, they're probably not doing something that's very important, or like they're probably not doing something that's going to take a lot more time to fix than if you were like wasting the time of another, you know, junior designer or something like that. So be careful about the kind of impact that you can have.
Right. Because a lead's time is multiplicative across everybody else that they
as
need
long
to
as
work
they're
with.
good.
Right. I need to start asking some audience questions. So as I'm going to be asking this one, I'm actually going to grab some props. Whoa.
Oh boy.
Production value. There's a lot of educational materials for game design out there. Some of it's good. Some of it's not. What? Oh, that fell.
I'm nervous now.
It's okay. It's okay.
Please come out in costume. Please be wearing a costume.
Oh, I wish I was coming out in a costume. That would be great. I'm not. Don't plan that far ahead, unfortunately. Okay. Here's a good enough stack, I think. So here are some books that I have from doing game design stuff.
Yes.
So you may pick any of these books to talk about if you like any of those. But what I'm saying is there's a lot of material out there. Some of it's good, some of it's not. Some of these books I feel like I liked about 10% of, and then others I'm like, this is the whole thing. I love this book. Understanding Comics, love that book. What do you like? What do you feel like has helped you in terms of educational materials?
I feel like I already hit this one, but you have I think all of the books. I don't think you have a book of lenses, which upsets me.
Which one?
A book of lenses.
Oh, I
you probably do have it. Yeah, of course. Yeah. The Art of Fun, or the Theory of Fun, the Book of Lenses, The Art of Game Design. Those are the three that, at the core, I would say you need to read those if you want to understand not just how we make games and why, but also possibly the most important element of being a game designer is understanding the psychology of what makes fun things fun. Why do we actually play games? What do we get out of the experience of interacting with games, with other people, of competition? Like there's a lot of psychological elements that I think go into game design, and that a lot of people don't talk about being a core element of game design. Is what you're really doing is you're building something for the psychology of other people, and you're exploiting the way that human brains experience specific stuff. And everything at its core is that. So knowing how our brains work, how we get rewarded from specific stuff, why we like to do this versus that, can be incredibly informative in how you approach designing something, because you don't have to guess at necessarily whether or not something's going to hit some of those boxes. You know it will, because we have analyzed people through many, many psychological studies, and we know these are quantized things that we can act on.
Yeah, psychology plays a big role in design, and that's why it's kind of become sort of a science. But as it's all science, we don't know the answers to everything. We're just studying it. Yeah. A book that was recommended to me about UI design was the Design of Everyday Things.
Yes, lovely book.
Yeah, which explains why like how do you know whether to push or pull a door? Yep. What the design behind a light switch, and I think that's a good one.
Did I recommend you that? You might have been.
It helps you see things abstractly from a different lens than you normally would outside of games. I think that looking at things from as many different angles as possible is good. And that's why I think just listening to GDC talks or listening to stories, that's why networking is important, not just because somebody can recommend you for a job if it comes up, but the most important thing is being able to talk to people and learn their personal stories. That's why you asked us about our game dev horror story, because it helps to hear other people's stories, and there's always just some moral or lesson to learn just from chatting with other people.
I would also say get your butt on YouTube and search around for people who are talking about the kinds of games that you are interested in. Again, search that stuff out. Before I applied to Obsidian, I went and I watched probably 30 or 40 hours of a fella named Joseph Anderson, who does long form reviews of games like Fallout 3, Fallout 4, Skyrim, all sorts of different RPGs and stuff like that, The Witcher, and he breaks them down very, very intelligently, very, very granularly, and talks about all of the different elements of the game, how they're fun, where they fail, all that kind of stuff. And he's not necessarily some world-class game designer that's some phenomenal person that I think everybody should listen to everything he says, but it's an individual who cares enough about the games that they're playing to think about them critically and to apply game design principles that they have either learned or that they have looked up in order to critique something that they're very passionate about. And when you can find the couple of people who are going to be really, really into that kind of stuff, you can watch their things and you can learn a lot about not just how somebody else is seeing it, but you can learn a lot of the way that people who aren't necessarily experts, but are people who really want to share knowledge about those kinds of things are looking at and analyzing games. And I think that is a very, very valuable, I am almost always happier to see somebody who is not a professional analyze a game, unless I'm sitting down and doing rigorous game analysis with another designer, because that fresh insight, that I'm not looking at things with the same, I'm a game designer. I can sit down and usually do that job. What I can't do is I can't look at a game like somebody who's never thought about game design before. I can't do that anymore. We lose that
Interesting.
power. That's the exchange we make for the superpower of being able to analyze things, is we lose that fresh eye. Every time you walk across a trigger zone, you know it's a trigger zone. Every time you're coming up on a vista, you know you're coming up on a vista. It's in you now and you're prepared for it. You don't have the same reactions as somebody who hasn't gone through that process of kind of learning how to analyze and inspect everything. And I think those are the most valuable ways for a designer to learn about any individual game, is from people who have either never played that game before, or people who are passionate about a specific thing but haven't spent all the time learning all the tricks of the trade and the engines and stuff like that. I think that's where most of the value comes out of. I love blind playthroughs of anything. I absolutely die for them.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
I'm
You
just
brought some
+1.
props, Tiffany.
I did.
think.
I went and
Okay.
grabbed props.
Okay.
Woo!
I mean, like, pretty much the topics that Kate and Kyle already touched on. Like, YouTube is huge. Like, whenever it's kind of embarrassing, maybe not. I think it's kind of cool. But whenever people are like, "Have you watched like the latest Handmaid's Tale or blah blah blah?" Part of me is like, I've actually just been watching people play games on YouTube. But YouTube's a huge source of info, and it's great because a lot of the creators on there too, you know, they're passionate about that stuff, so they're doing it because they want to teach or want to show off like how things are done.
Oh, the Game Maker's Toolkit. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So that stuff's all really awesome. Super great resource for free too. And to touch on what Kyle was talking about, you know, looking at design books that aren't necessarily game design, like the push versus pull doors, because a lot of that stuff you learn about how objects and how things are subconsciously communicating use to you. So I brought a couple books. This one I got for Christmas. Design is Storytelling. It just talks about all these different ways that design pops up in the world that you don't even realize, and how it makes your life either better or worse.
What is that book called?
Design is Storytelling
Design is Storytelling.
by Ellen Lepton.
All right.
That one's cool. And then I just have a couple that are like just different things in the world that are just super interesting. This one's about the underground and just like all the different stuff in underground that we've built as humans.
Cool.
This one's about interior design, so like how stuff affects your happiness and your health, and you know, talking about how lighting even helps that, arranging things so that you get light in and all that jazz. And this one's a beast. I love this one. This one's 99 Invisible. They have a podcast as well, but they talk about just different designs in the city that go unnoticed.
I haven't heard of any of these books, and I love them all.
Oh yeah. And then the last one is just for, I feel like these are like your craft growth books. And then this one was recommended in school. This one's Steal Like an Artist. And this one's a great one for just kind of developing yourself as an artist and how you approach growing your creativity. And this was a huge one. It's a super quick read, really small pages. Some of them are just like these big quotes. So
be boring.
Yeah, I'd recommend this one. This one's a good one.
Oh man. Okay. I say we're coming to the end of our journey here, folks.
It's too short.
It's too short. We could talk about this for
1,000 years.
Time.
Yeah.
Long time. But that being said, for those of you familiar with Discord, We have other questions that I wasn't able to get to from the audience. So if you guys are able to there and answer those questions, I'm sure that would mean the world to them. This has been a fantastic panel. I'm glad they asked me back, but I'm also going to be on it 4 with another, moderating another talk.
Nice.
Plug for me and Anna Nguyen. She's the design producer doing the talk. Are there any closing remarks you would like to leave the designers of the future?
2, very briefly. Fail faster. Go out there and screw stuff up. Fail at things. Just make mistakes. It's the best way to learn. Secondly, the book Steal Like an Artist. Steal like everyone. There are no new ideas. Nobody has come up with something amazing and brand new in a vacuum, and it's wonderful and the best. Look at everything that everyone else is doing and steal all of it and then make it better and make it your own. Don't plagiarize, just steal and then make it your own, make it better, improve it. Think about ways to take the stuff that people are already doing and apply the principles of design that you've learned to improve those things and create new stuff out of it, because it's from that primordial ooze that the real magnificence happens.
Yeah, it's just like the Magic School Bus, get messy, make mistakes, just do it. But yeah, I think so. Something that I like to say, this is a thing to comfort you, not to make you anxious, but there's a very good chance that everybody listening to this, that not everybody listening to this call will become part of the game dev industry. But I think that everybody who has an interest in making games should never let that interest die. And I think that you need to at least try to make a game and just struggle through it. It's going to be a struggle, like making your first game, but it's like playing a game that you really like, but is really hard. It's like playing Dark Souls or something. Like you love it, but it's painful. So and you want to keep doing it just because you enjoy it so much. So try out making games. Work with other people. If you have friends that you can make games with, that's great. Try to make a game. See if it's something that you enjoy, and whether or not you end up becoming part of the game industry. There are so many skills. Every skill that you can learn from making a game will be invaluable to any other profession as well. So I think that game dev is fascinating for that reason. And yeah, just struggle through it. And and when it comes to applying for jobs, just try and apply for any jobs that you're going to personally enjoy, and try to find a company that is going to respect you and has people that you enjoy working with, because otherwise there is no point. Initially just take it's cliche, but it's you miss every shot that you don't take. So embrace every opportunity that comes your way. A lot of times I've seen studios put out jobs that are for mid-level positions, but they're really looking for anybody that they can find, and they'll often hire a junior developer. So you can apply for those positions, and every time you apply for a new position and take more interviews and talk to people, it's going to be a learning experience, and it's just going to make you better as a developer, and you will learn something from it. It's like free learning. It's better than like you'll learn more from just doing things than you will from any of the college courses that you're taking. Yeah, and then selfish plug. There are a lot of Activision jobs open right now, and there are jobs on my team at High Moon. So if anybody is looking for jobs, there's a ton out there right now.
Yeah, man.
Thank you, Kyle.
Yeah, mine's gonna be a bit cheesy as well, but honestly, my general advice for as just a closing thought is be humble, be respectful. It's very cheesy, but like it really is a team effort. And the industry is so small. so surprisingly small, and you don't want to be that guy, right? So like if you show that you're willing to learn, willing to collaborate, willing to communicate, there will immediately be so many people in your corner wanting to help you grow as a designer and as a person. So yeah, that's pretty much it for me. Just be humble and be receptive and all that jazz.
Yeah, and don't worry about what you don't know. Like I'll steal this from a talk that we heard from Kate Edwards, Peter. But what you know and what other people know is not like mutually exclusive. It's a Venn diagram. Like they know things, you know things that they also know. They know things that you do not know, but you will also know things that they do not know. So it's going to seem like initially that you don't know anything, but then you'll soon find out after talking to people that the 20-year grizzled game veteran still has things that they do not know.
All right,
And
I need to
it'll
cut things off right there because the next event's about to start. So thank you, Kyle Turchik, Kate Hendricks, Tiffany Trombley. This has been wonderful. If y'all can check out the Discord, I'm sure people will be very grateful.
Thank you all
Awesome.
so much.
Thank
Yeah,
you
thank
everybody
you.
for listening.
Yeah, bye guys. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Great.